seen yet. And so we can see the outside of the vessel is here, tracing around. And then inside is a lot more pink stuff. So a lot of fibrosis has happened. And we can see there's still some smaller vessels, but there's also obviously these very large channels. And I think I put in, I tried to put in something. So here's a nice EVG stain, and it really shows obviously the outline of the vessel. And you can see that there's even some EVG being deposited because again, this is an angiogenic process and they're trying to make vessels, but it's much more disorganized and not as sort of multi-layered like this nicely formed vessel. And then we can also see these webs, as they're called, grossly. So grossly we call them webs. And you can tell that there's the original vessel here, and then we have all this fibrous tissue that's branching, and we can get little channels through it. And so these will get more and more organized. This is probably about as organized as this one is going to get, where it's fine, thin septae. The thicker septae tend to get smaller and smaller with time, and they become these thin webs. This is one last example just to show how sometimes the fibrosis doesn't really resolve and you end up with these really tiny channels that are going through. You can also have calcium deposits and things like that. So it's highly variable. You can even get smooth muscle wall deposition within the organization of the thrombus. So you can see that's like at the center. This definitely was not there before, but you can get lots of different findings. And you can tell it was kind of like probably trying to make it bigger, but it just didn't work. It stayed a tiny little vessel. Okay. All right. So this is completely rhetorical. I do not expect audience participation, so don't worry. But just think for yourselves. I have 4 examples of either postmortem clots or true thromboemboli, and you can just decide for yourself. And then I'll explain which features. So this is the first one. I'll give you just a second to think about it. I will say that just to orient everyone, and it's tough. I wish these were like interactive slides where I could zoom up and down, because even for myself, that's really helpful. These static images are much harder. But the vessel wall is here and up here. And then the intravascular space is obviously this whole thing. So hopefully everybody's kind of leaning not real thrombus, not real embolus. This is a classic like red currant jelly type thing. The features that might get us hung up if we were like really focusing on, again, that list of things, is that we have a lot of retraction artifacts. There's a lot of space. And we did say that thrombi are oftentimes smaller than their investing artery. But that can also just be an artifact. So again, no one feature is going to help us. And if we look at the composition of this, even though there's a lot of chatter artifact and it's kind of been torn up a little bit, which it honestly kind of suggests that it's not real because it doesn't have that density. It has the red currant jelly friability, even on a tiny little section on histology. But what we do have is clearly just red blood cells. So this is just blood that's settled out. And, up here we might have a little bit of that kind of like, leukocytes and a little bit of fibrin. But again, we can get that. So this is a really classic red currant jelly, not antemortem anything. Okay, this is the next one. Again, I'll give you guys a minute. But to orient, there's actually some cartilage here, so we would probably have like a very large airway nearby. And then this is the vessel, and it's got a little bit of a curvy outline, and then this is the other side. So I think this was partly a branch point, which is why we get this septum coming up. So, and then the intravascular spaces, all of this. Okay, so hopefully we're thinking true thrombus or embolus, either one. Part of what we can see are that we do have lines of Zahn. I'm going to point out several different areas. And again, they can transition. They don't always have to be oriented in the same direction, but we do have nice thin layering. I'm kind of here. I got a nice stuff here if we want to hallucinate. I like these over here. This is nice too. So we have multiple directions that this is being laid down. We can even speculate that maybe these were some more recent layers that were coming down. I think there's blood building up behind it, and this is probably not part of the clot, so it's kind of a good comparison. But again, we maybe even have some lines here, so we don't have to get too hung up on that. Other clues are that the boundary between the vessel wall itself and the clot, it looks really clear right here. We can see that nice demarcation, but here it's getting a little bit blurred. And if I was to go closer in, and I know you guys don't have that privilege, and I know that I got to look at this beforehand, but this is all very subacute, sort of more advanced organization where fibroblasts have come in and collagen has been laid down. So the reason that it looks the same pink and we would confirm that by going in, is because there's been a lot of organization. So all of those things come together to help us with this one. Okay, next one. This one only has vessel at the bottom, and the rest is intravascular space. This one's kind of busy, so I want to give you guys just a little bit of time to scroll around it. I think one of the things that's tricky about this one is that it has a lot of right angle, sort of web-like septae in terms of the leukocytes and the fibrin. So if I only had this area, I think it would be challenging. I want to propose, and I've never read this, but I have come to believe it in my heart, that I think that density has a lot to do with whether these are true or not. Again, Jody may watch this and totally disagree with me. Darren may watch this and totally disagree with me. But I do think like these things are formed under pressure when someone is alive. So this is a true thrombus. And we do have some areas where we have more classic banding, like here. But even this banding is a lot more leukocytes and fibrin as opposed to the classic fibrin platelet banding. So it's tough. But I think there is a directionality and there is just kind of a density to this whole thing where these layers seem to be compacting on each other. And then again, the privilege that I had of looking at this beforehand is that we do have a nice adherent border, and then there was some organization as well. But I don't think that's necessary. This one also, I will say, just looked very obvious grossly. And I also want to emphasize that in learning pulmonary thromboemboli, the gross histologic correlation is super helpful. And I've even had the occasional one where like I saw it grossly, but I was like really not convinced. And then it kind of had some features on histology, and you start to think, and it's like, okay, you just have to trust that the gestalt is accurate, and decide whether it was more consistent with one or not. And sometimes I'm debating these things as a way of practicing, and it's not even relevant to the cause of death, but it's also good when you get your autopsy specimens and you know that there's no pulmonary thromboemboli, to just be checking the vessels and being like, okay, I am so sure that this is not a pulmonary thromboembolus, because this is just for example, relatively healthy person who died suddenly in a car accident. If you're on forensics, right, they should not have pulmonary emboli. So looking at your vessels on histology can be super helpful for just setting that expectation and really training the algorithm that is our brains. Okay, last one, and I promise we'll get done. I think we'll be right on time. So this is the intravascular space is pretty obvious in this one, but you have your vessel here towards the outside, some fat around it, and then this is a bit more vessel, so it's just curving. Okay. And this, hopefully, again, this is something you might see. I literally took this from just a random case. This is definitely not a thromboembolus or a thrombi. It's not adherent. It's made of a pretty random assortment of red blood cells, fibrin, and some leukocytes. The directionality of their banding is pretty random, and they're just kind of fat and wide bands, if anything at all. So this is really classic for not a thromboembolus. Okay, I wasn't sure if I would have enough time, but I'm putting this in just for interest. Sometimes we really can't see these at all. So in particular, people who get really chronic thromboemboli in like small vessels, they may have a coagulation disorder or be chronically ill or something like that. We can't see them at all. But if you get an EVG stain, and this is such a great trick that actually Dr. Regula taught me when I got here, you can pull out from the surrounding fibrosis the residual elastic lamina of the vessels that were embolized and ultimately obliterated. So the H&E for this same section was here. And I can't see any, like there's nothing in here that would suggest a chronic pulmonary thromboembolus to me, but they had in just their whole lung these other areas of chronic emboli sites. And so Dr. Regula's advice was just to get an EVG on a couple representative sections. And it was really interesting because you can get these and just be completely unaware of them, and you need the elastic lamina to see them. And you can even see in this one, so here's the original vessel with the elastic lamina, and it has recanalized, and it has these tiny little guys feeding through it. So it's really doing its best. This one, not so much. This one got kind of obliterated and no blood is making it through. But on the H&E, I would see these vessels, but I would not be able to see the pattern of the elastic lamina at all. And so I would not have known that that was there. So that is totally academic and interesting, and the end of my slideshow.